Blood spattered against the dry earth as Emma Pierce dragged herself forward, leaving a crimson trail in the dirt behind her. The scorching Colorado sun beat down mercilessly as she clawed her way from the weathered cabin that had become her prison. Each movement sent waves of agony through her body, but the desperate need to escape drove her onward. Her once white dress was now stained with dirt and blood, torn at the edges from her desperate flight. She had to keep moving. She had to get away. Quentin Nash pulled his hat lower to shield his eyes from the blinding sunlight. His horse, Midnight, had been acting skittish all morning, and now he understood why. The trail of blood leading from the old Harmon cabin caught his eye immediately. In his 15 years of ranching in Las Animas, Colorado, he'd seen plenty of troubling sights, but something about this made his stomach turn. He dismounted swiftly, following the trail with his hand hovering near his holster. "Hello," he called out, his voice carrying across the empty plains. That's when he saw her, a woman, barely conscious, her golden hair matted with blood and dirt. She was crawling away from the cabin with a determination that struck him to his core. "Madam," Quentin rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" Emma flinched at the touch of hands on her shoulders, a cry escaping her lips as she tried to pull away. Her vision swam with black spots, but she could make out the silhouette of a man against the harsh sunlight. Was he one of them? Had they found her already? "Please," she whispered, her voice raw from screaming. "Don't take me back there." Quentin's heart clenched at the fear in her voice. "I won't hurt you, madam, I promise. I'm going to help you." He gently turned her over, sucking in a breath when he saw the extent of her injuries. A deep gash ran along her forehead, and bruises bloomed across her pale skin. Her right arm was bent at an unnatural angle. "My name is Quentin Nash. I own the Double Creek Ranch just over that ridge," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm despite the rage building inside him at whoever had done this. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe, all right?" Emma's eyes, a startling shade of green despite the pain clouding them, locked onto his face. She saw kindness there, in the weathered lines around his eyes and the gentle set of his mouth beneath his mustache. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she nodded once before darkness claimed her. Quentin worked quickly, tearing strips from his own shirt to bind her most severe wounds. He whistled for Midnight, who approached cautiously, still unsettled by the scent of blood. "Easy, girl," he murmured, gathering the unconscious woman into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and that worried him almost as much as her injuries. How long had she been out here? Who had done this to her? The cabin loomed behind them, silent and foreboding. Quentin considered investigating, but one look at the woman's pale face decided him. She needed a doctor, and quickly. He mounted carefully, cradling her against his chest, and turned Midnight toward town. The journey to Las Animas would take nearly an hour, even at a gallop. He prayed she would hold on that long. "Stay with me," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "Just stay with me." The town of Las Animas appeared on the horizon just as Quentin felt the woman stir in his arms. Her eyelids fluttered and a soft moan escaped her lips. "You're all right," he assured her. "We're almost to town. Doc Wilson will patch you up. They'll find me," she whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear her over the pounding of hooves. "Who will?" Quentin asked, but her eyes had closed again. He rode straight to Doc Wilson's house at the edge of town, shouting before he'd even dismounted. "Doc, I need help out here." The door flew open, and Samuel Wilson, a man in his 60s with a shock of white hair and kind eyes, took in the situation immediately. "Bring her in, quick," he ordered, holding the door wider. Quentin carried her inside, laying her gently on the examination table in the doctor's back room. Found her crawling away from the old Harmon cabin, Quentin explained as the doctor began examining her. Looks like she's been beaten something fierce. Doc Wilson's face grew grim as he took in her injuries. Beaten and more, I'd wager. This arm's broken clean through. She's got at least 2 cracked ribs from what I can feel, and this gash on her head needs stitching. Will she live, Doc? Quentin asked, his voice tight. If infection doesn't set in, yes, but she's going to need careful tending. The doctor glanced up at him. You know who she is? Quentin shook his head. Never seen her before today. Well, whoever did this might come looking for her, Doc Wilson said grimly. Might be safer if she weren't here when they do. Quentin nodded slowly. I'll take her to the ranch once you've tended to her. My sister Rebecca can help look after her. Doc Wilson set to work, cleaning and stitching the wound on her forehead while Quentin helped hold her still. When he began setting her broken arm, she screamed, her eyes flying open in panic. It's all right, Quentin said, gripping her good hand. You're safe. The doctor's helping you. Her eyes found his, wild with pain and fear. Don't let them take me, she pleaded. I won't, he promised. You have my word. That seemed to calm her, and though tears streamed down her face as Doc Wilson splinted her arm, she remained conscious, her gaze never leaving Quentin's face. What's your name? He asked gently, hoping to distract her from the pain. Emma, she whispered. Emma Pierce. You're not from around here, are you, Miss Pierce? She shook her head slightly. Denver. I was traveling to Santa Fe when. Her voice trailed off, her eyes filling with fresh terror. You don't have to talk about it now, Quentin assured her. Just rest. Doc Wilson finished binding her ribs and gave her a dose of laudanum for the pain. As the medicine took effect, her eyelids grew heavy. Will you stay? She asked Quentin, her voice barely audible. I'll be right here, he promised, and she allowed herself to drift into a drugged sleep. Doc Wilson washed his hands in a basin of water, his face troubled. She's been through hell, Quentin. Those injuries didn't all happen today. Some of those bruises are days old. Quentin's jaw clenched. Who would do such a thing? There have been rumors, Doc Wilson said quietly. Travelers gone missing along the Santa Fe Trail. Women, mostly. Sheriff Jenkins said the federal marshals are investigating, but... He shrugged helplessly. Quentin looked down at Emma's face, peaceful now in sleep. Something protective stirred in his chest. I'll find out who did this, he said. And they'll answer for it. Be careful, Doc Wilson warned. If what I suspect is true, these aren't men to trifle with. I'm taking her to Double Creek. If anyone comes looking, you haven't seen either of us. The doctor nodded. Give it a few hours for the worst of the pain to pass. Then you can move her. Quentin settled into a chair beside the examination table, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. Who was she? What had brought her to that cabin? And who had hurt her so badly that she'd risked death crawling away from it? He didn't have answers, but as he watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, he made a silent vow. Emma Pierce would be safe now. Whatever it took, whoever came for her, they would have to go through him first. The laudanum kept Emma unconscious for several hours. Quentin used the time to send word to his sister about their incoming guest, and to purchase a few necessities, a fresh dress, some personal items, and food that would be gentle on Emma's stomach after what must have been days of deprivation. As dusk fell, he prepared to transport her to Double Creek Ranch. Doc Wilson had fashioned a sling for her broken arm and provided medicines for pain and to prevent infection. He helped Quentin secure her on midnight, arranging her so she could ride in front of him without putting pressure on her injured ribs. Keep her quiet for at least a week, Doc Wilson instructed. Those ribs need time to heal, and so does that arm. I'll ride out in a few days to check on her. Thanks, Doc, Quentin said, pressing extra coins into the older man's hand. Just keep her safe, the doctor replied. And watch your back. They left town as night was falling, taking a circuitous route to avoid being followed. Emma stirred occasionally, but remained largely unaware of the journey. Quentin kept one arm securely around her waist, feeling each shallow breath she took as a small victory. Double Creek Ranch came into view just as the moon rose high enough to cast silver light across the Colorado plains. It wasn't the largest ranch in the county, but Quentin had built it from nothing after returning from the war in '66, and he felt a surge of pride each time he saw it. Tonight, the lights blazing in the windows of the main house welcomed him like a beacon. Rebecca Nash Thornton, his younger sister by 4 years, was waiting on the porch, her face pinched with worry. At 32, she'd been widowed 2 years earlier when her husband's horse had thrown him during a thunderstorm. She'd moved back to Double Creek with her son, Michael, shortly after. "Oh, Quentin," she gasped when she saw Emma's condition. "The poor thing." "Help me get her inside," Quentin said, carefully dismounting while supporting Emma's weight. Rebecca had prepared the guest bedroom, turning down the covers and laying out clean linens. Together, they transferred Emma to the bed. In the lamplight, her injuries seemed even more stark against her pale skin. "Who did this to her?" Rebecca asked, her voice tight with anger. "I don't know yet," Quentin admitted. "Found her crawling away from that old cabin up near Willow Creek. Doc thinks she might have been held captive there." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. "The missing travelers." "You don't think I do," Quentin said grimly, "and I think whoever did this might come looking for her." Rebecca squared her shoulders. "Let them try. Nobody's harming this girl again, not under my roof." Quentin smiled at his sister's fierce protectiveness. "Where's Michael?" "Already asleep. I'll explain everything to him in the morning." She looked down at Emma's dirt-streaked face. "I'll sit with her tonight. You should get some rest." "I promised I'd stay," Quentin said, settling into a chair beside the bed. Rebecca gave him a curious look but didn't argue. "I'll bring you some coffee then." Left alone with Emma, Quentin studied her face. Even beneath the bruises and the stitched gash, he could see she was beautiful. Her hair, now cleaned of blood, was the color of honey, and her features were delicate. What had brought her to Colorado? Who was waiting for her in Santa Fe? As if sensing his thoughts, Emma's eyes fluttered open. Confusion clouded her face as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "You're at Double Creek Ranch," Quentin said gently. "My home. You're safe here." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Mr. Nash," she whispered. "Quentin, please." She tried to sit up but gasped at the pain in her ribs. Quentin quickly moved to help her, placing a pillow behind her back for support. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger than it had been earlier, "for saving my life." "Anyone would have done the same," he said. A bitter smile touched her lips. "No, not anyone." The haunted look in her eyes made his chest tighten. "Miss Pierce." "Emma," she interrupted. "Please." "Emma," he corrected himself. "I know you've been through a terrible ordeal and you don't need to speak of it until you're ready. But I should tell you that Doc Wilson thinks whoever hurt you might come looking." Fear flashed across her face, but she mastered it quickly. "They will," she said with certainty. "There were 3 of them. She swallowed hard. They take women. Sell them to mining camps in the mountains or worse places in Mexico." Quentin felt cold fury build inside him. Human trafficking. He'd heard rumors, but to have it confirmed so starkly. "How did you escape?" he asked. "They'd been drinking. The one watching me passed out." Her voice was flat, detached, as if she were recounting someone else's story. "I managed to get his keys, but the other 2 heard me. I fought, but—" She gestured to her injuries. "I got away, but I knew I couldn't outrun them, so I crawled, hoping they'd think I'd gone in another direction." "You're incredibly brave," Quentin said, meaning every word. Emma shook her head. "The others weren't so lucky. There was a girl named Sarah. They took her away 3 days ago, And before that, a woman called Mary. I don't know what happened to them." The door opened, and Rebecca entered carrying a tray with coffee and a bowl of broth. Emma tensed at the new presence. "This is my sister, Rebecca," Quentin explained quickly. "She lives here with me and her son." Rebecca set down the tray and approached the bed slowly, her face gentle. "It's good to see you awake, Miss Pierce. I've brought some broth if you feel up to eating." Emma relaxed slightly. "Thank you, and please call me Emma." Rebecca smiled. "Emma, then. Let me help you." As Rebecca helped Emma with the broth, Quentin stepped outside to clear his head. The night air was cool against his face as he gazed out at the land that had been his home for 15 years. He'd always felt safe here, removed from the lawlessness that sometimes plagued frontier towns. Now that safety felt like an illusion. He thought of the men who had hurt Emma, who were likely still out there looking for her. Men who traded in human lives as if they were cattle. His hand drifted to the gun at his hip, a habit from his days fighting in the war. He'd hoped never to use it against another man again, but for Emma Pierce, he would if necessary. Rebecca joined him on the porch a few minutes later. "She's resting now," she said quietly. "She told me a little more about what happened. And it's worse than we thought. She believes they're part of a larger operation. She overheard them talking about deliveries and payments." Rebecca shuddered. "She said they grabbed her right off the stagecoach. The driver was in on it." Quentin's jaw tightened. "We need to tell Sheriff Jenkins." "She's terrified of going to the authorities," Rebecca said. "Says these men have connections, that they pay off lawmen to look the other way." "Not Jenkins," Quentin insisted. "He's a good man, maybe, but she's not ready to trust anyone yet." Rebecca placed a hand on his arm. "She needs time to heal, Quentin, and she needs to feel safe. She'll have that here," he promised, "for as long as she needs it." Rebecca studied his face in the moonlight. "You care for her already, don't you?" "I barely know her," Quentin protested. "That's not an answer," Rebecca said with a small smile. "Just be careful. She's been through a terrible trauma. The last thing she needs is another man she feels she can't trust." With that gentle warning, Rebecca left him to his thoughts. Quentin remained on the porch for a long time, watching the stars and contemplating the woman sleeping under his roof, a woman whose courage had already earned his respect, and whose vulnerability awakened something protective in him that he hadn't felt in years. He would keep her safe. And somehow, he would find the men who had hurt her and bring them to justice. That was a promise he intended to keep. The first light of dawn was painting the sky when Quentin finally returned to Emma's room. He found her awake, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. "You should be resting," he said softly. She turned to him, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "I've slept enough to last a lifetime these past days." Quentin pulled the chair closer to her bed. "Are you in pain?" "Doc left medicine. It's bearable," she interrupted. "I'd rather have a clear head." He nodded, understanding her need for control after having so much taken from her. "Rebecca says you told her more about the men who took you." Emma's eyes darkened. "Yes, they're part of a network. The man in charge is called Garrett. I never saw him, but the others spoke of him with fear." She paused, her good hand clutching the bedsheet. "They said he'd be angry that they'd kept me so long, that I was meant for a special client." Quentin felt sick at the implication. "Do you know their names? The men who held you?" "The one I escaped from was called Frank. There was another Roy. And the third, Jackson, I think." She frowned, trying to recall. "They were careful not to use last names." "Did they mention where this Garrett might be found?" Emma shook her head. "Only that he operates out of Denver but moves frequently." Her eyes found his, suddenly intense. "You're not thinking of going after them, are you? These men need to be stopped," Quentin said firmly, "before they hurt anyone else." "They'll kill you," Emma said, her voice breaking. "There are more of them than you know." I won't do anything reckless, he assured her. But I need to at least inform Sheriff Jenkins. He can contact the federal marshals. Emma looked away, her shoulders tense. What if they don't believe me? What if they're part of it? Quentin reached out, hesitating before gently covering her hand with his own. Emma, I give you my word. I won't let anyone hurt you again. She looked down at their hands, then back to his face. Something in his expression must have reassured her because she nodded slightly. All right, but please be careful. The moment was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. Uncle Quentin. Michael Thornton, Rebecca's 8-year-old son, stood there in his nightshirt, his dark hair tousled from sleep. His eyes were fixed curiously on Emma. Michael, this is Miss Pierce, Quentin said. She'll be staying with us for a while. Miss Pierce, this is my nephew, Michael. Emma's face softened as she looked at the boy. Hello, Michael. You can call me Emma if you like. Michael approached cautiously. Mama says you were hurt by bad men. Michael. Rebecca appeared behind him, looking mortified. I'm so sorry, Emma. He's too curious for his own good. It's all right, Emma said, surprising Quentin with her composure. Yes, Michael, some bad men hurt me, but your uncle saved me and now I'm getting better. Michael nodded solemnly. Uncle Quentin's the bravest man in all of Colorado. He fought in the war and everything. A genuine smile touched Emma's lips for the first time. Is that so? Quentin felt heat rise in his face. Your mother's waiting breakfast, Michael. Why don't you go help her? The boy hesitated. Can I bring Miss Emma some too? That's very kind of you, Emma said. I'd like that. Michael beamed and ran off, Rebecca following after giving Emma an apologetic smile. He's a sweet boy, Emma said once they were alone. He is, Quentin agreed. Lost his father 2 years ago. He's been through a lot, but children are resilient. Emma's eyes grew distant. Yes, they are. Something in her tone made Quentin wonder if she was speaking from experience. You have family, Emma, he asked gently. Anyone who might be worried about you? Pain flashed across her face. No, my parents died in a fire when I was 16. I've been on my own since then. I'm sorry, Quentin said. What took you to Denver? And why were you traveling to Santa Fe? Emma was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to share. I was a teacher in Denver. The school closed for lack of funds, and I heard there was need for teachers in New Mexico territory. She hesitated. There was also a man in Denver, someone I needed to get away from. Did he hurt you? Quentin asked, a protective edge entering his voice. Not physically, Emma said quietly, but he made promises he didn't intend to keep. When I discovered the truth about him, about his family. She shook her head. It doesn't matter now. I just wanted a fresh start. Before Quentin could ask more, Michael returned with a tray bearing a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, along with a cup of coffee. He set it carefully on Emma's lap, beaming with pride. I carried it all by myself, he announced. You did a wonderful job, Emma said warmly. Thank you, Michael. Can I stay and talk to Miss Emma? Michael asked Quentin, his eyes pleading. Quentin glanced at Emma, who nodded slightly. For a little while, he agreed. But Miss Emma needs her rest, so don't tire her out. As Michael launched into stories about the ranch and his pony Daisy, Quentin slipped out. He needed to speak with Sheriff Jenkins, but he was reluctant to leave Emma, even with Rebecca and the ranch hands present. The men who had hurt her were still out there, and if they were as organized as she claimed, they wouldn't give up easily. He found Rebecca in the kitchen, preparing a basket of food. I'm riding into town, he told her. Will you be all right here with Emma? Rebecca nodded. Jake and Pedro are both working the north pasture today. I've asked them to keep an eye out for strangers. And you know, I keep Pa's shotgun loaded. Quentin smiled at his sister's practicality. She'd had to become tough after losing her husband, running the household portion of Double Creek with the same efficiency he managed the cattle. I won't be gone long, he promised. "Just need to speak with Jenkins." "Be careful what you say," Rebecca warned, "if Emma's right about these men having connections." "I know. I'll feel him out first, make sure we can trust him." Rebecca handed him the food basket. "Take this for your ride, and Quentin." She hesitated. "I see how you look at her. Rebecca, just listen. She's been through a terrible ordeal. She needs time to heal, not just her body but her spirit. Whatever you're feeling, be patient with it, and with her." Quentin accepted the basket, touched by his sister's concern. "I know. Right now, all that matters is keeping her safe." "Good," Rebecca said. "Now go talk to Jenkins, and for heaven's sake, be back before dark." Quentin returned to Emma's room to let her know he was leaving. She was alone now, Michael having been called away for his morning chores. "I won't be gone long," he assured her. "Rebecca and the hands will keep you safe." Emma looked up at him, her green eyes troubled. "What will you tell the sheriff?" "Only what he needs to know for now," Quentin said. "That I found an injured woman who was being held against her will. I'll feel out whether he can be trusted before saying more." Emma nodded, though anxiety still lined her face. "Quentin, if they find me here, they'll hurt you and your family. Perhaps I should leave when I'm stronger." "No," he said firmly. "Double Creek is the safest place for you right now. And I'm not afraid of these men." "You should be," she whispered. "They're monsters in human skin." Quentin knelt beside her bed, his eyes level with hers. "I've faced monsters before, Emma. In the war, I saw what men can do to each other. But I also saw courage and goodness even in the darkest places." He took her hand carefully. "You're not alone anymore, I give you my word on that." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Why? Why would you risk so much for a stranger?" Quentin couldn't explain the connection he felt to her, the fierce protectiveness that had taken root in his heart the moment he'd found her. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because you deserve to be safe." A tear spilled down her cheek, and he resisted the urge to brush it away. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before rising. "Rest now. I'll be back soon." As he rode toward Las Animas, Quentin couldn't shake the image of Emma's face from his mind. In just one day, she had come to occupy a place in his thoughts that no woman had in years, not since Maria, his fiancée who had died of fever while he was away at war. He had returned to Colorado to find her grave already covered with wildflowers, his dreams of a future together buried with her. After that, he had thrown himself into building Double Creek, finding purpose in hard work and in helping Rebecca after she was widowed. He had convinced himself that was enough, that he didn't need the companionship of a wife or the joy of children of his own. But something about Emma Pierce had awakened feelings he thought long dead. Her courage in the face of unspeakable cruelty, her kindness toward Michael despite her own suffering, the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide, all of it drew him to her in a way that both exhilarated and terrified him. Sheriff Thomas Jenkins was sitting outside the jailhouse when Quentin rode into town, his weathered face turned toward the sun. At 55, Jenkins had been sheriff of Las Animas for nearly 20 years, and Quentin had always found him to be fair and honest. "Quentin Nash," Jenkins greeted him. "What brings you to town on such a fine morning?" "Need to speak with you, Tom," Quentin said, dismounting. "Privately, if you don't mind." Something in his tone must have alerted the sheriff, because he nodded and led Quentin inside without further questions. Once the door was closed, Quentin leaned against the desk, choosing his words carefully. "Yesterday, I found a woman near death crawling away from the old Harmon cabin. She'd been beaten, her arm broken. Doc Wilson patched her up." Jenkins' expression grew serious. "Who is she?" "Her name is Emma Pierce. She was traveling from Denver to Santa Fe when she was abducted from the stagecoach." Quentin watched the sheriff's face carefully as he continued. She says she was held captive by men who are part of a human trafficking ring, that they take women and sell them. Jenkins was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he swore softly. I knew it. The missing travelers. We found 3 bodies last year, all women, all with signs of abuse. Federal marshals have been investigating, but these bastards are slippery. Relief washed over Quentin. Jenkins wasn't part of it. She's scared, Tom. Says these men have connections, that they pay off lawmen. Jenkins nodded grimly. Not here they don't, but I've heard rumors about some of the smaller settlements and certain officials in Denver. He ran a hand over his face. Where is she now? Safe, Quentin said, not quite ready to reveal Emma's location. But she believes they'll come looking for her. She gave me 3 names, Frank, Roy, and Jackson. Said their boss is someone called Garrett who operates out of Denver. Jenkins grabbed a pencil and paper, jotting down the names. This matches what we've heard. Garrett's a ghost, no one's ever seen him who's lived to describe him, but we know he exists. He looked up at Quentin. Your Miss Pierce is the first victim we've found alive. Her testimony could be crucial. She's not ready to come forward officially, Quentin said. She needs time to heal, to feel safe. I understand, Jenkins said, but if she does decide to testify, the marshals will ensure her protection. For now, I'll keep her safe, Quentin said firmly. Jenkins studied him. This is dangerous ground, Quentin. These aren't ordinary outlaws. They're organized, well-funded, and ruthless. I'm aware of the risk. I'll send word to Marshal Hayes in Denver, Jenkins decided. He's been leading this investigation. In the meantime, keep your eyes open. If these men are looking for her, they'll start by checking nearby ranches. I'm counting on it, Quentin said with a hard edge to his voice. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. Don't do anything foolish. If you see strangers snooping around, you ride for help. Don't try to handle this alone. Quentin nodded, though they both knew he wasn't making any promises. Is there anything else you can tell me about these men? Anything that might help me recognize them if they come around? Jenkins considered. The few witnesses we've had describe 3 men who often work together. One's tall with a scar across his chin that might be your Frank. Another's heavyset with a missing front tooth. The third is younger, maybe mid-20s, with unusually light-colored eyes. And they operate between here and Denver, mostly along the stagecoach routes. They're smart, they pick victims who won't be missed immediately. Women traveling alone, usually. Quentin absorbed this information, his mind already forming plans. Thanks, Tom. I'll be in touch. As he turned to leave, Jenkins called after him. Quentin, be careful, and tell Miss Pierce she's braver than she knows. The ride back to Double Creek gave Quentin time to think. Jenkins' confirmation of Emma's story had only strengthened his resolve to protect her, but it also forced him to confront the reality of the danger they faced. These men wouldn't give up easily, not when Emma could identify them and potentially bring down their entire operation. He pushed midnight harder, suddenly anxious to get back to the ranch, to make sure Emma was safe. The sun was high overhead now, promising another scorching day. As he crested the final hill before Double Creek came into view, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. Everything looked normal. The ranch hands were visible in the distance, moving cattle to fresh pasture. Smoke curled from the chimney of the main house, and Quentin could make out Rebecca hanging laundry in the yard. As he approached, his sister waved, her face relaxed and unconcerned. No strangers had come calling in his absence. How is she? He asked as he dismounted. Better, Rebecca said. She managed to eat a proper breakfast and even sat up in the chair by the window for a while. Michael's been reading to her from his adventure books. Quentin smiled, picturing the scene. And no visitors, not a soul, Rebecca assured him. What did Jenkins say? Quentin quickly filled her in on his conversation with the sheriff. Rebecca's face grew tight with concern. "So it's all true," she said quietly. "These men are part of something bigger." "Yes, but Jenkins is trustworthy and he's contacting the federal marshals." Quentin patted her shoulder reassuringly. "We'll get through this, Beck. We've weathered worse." Rebecca nodded, though worry still creased her brow. "She asked about you several times. I think she was afraid you might not come back." Something warm unfurled in Quentin's chest at the thought that Emma had been concerned for him. "I should go see her." "She's resting now," Rebecca said. "Doc Wilson rode out while you were gone. Says she's healing well but needs to stay quiet for at least another week." "Did he say anything else?" Rebecca hesitated. "Just that. Well, that she's lucky, that the physical abuse could have been worse." She didn't elaborate, but Quentin understood her meaning. For all the violence Emma had endured, at least she had been spared that particular violation. "I'll check on her later," he decided. "For now, I think I'll ride the property line, make sure everything's secure." Rebecca touched his arm. "Don't push yourself too hard, Quentin. You barely slept last night." "I'll rest when I know we're safe," he said, already turning back to midnight. The perimeter check revealed nothing unusual, but Quentin took the opportunity to speak with his ranch hands, warning them to be alert for strangers. Jake and Pedro, both loyal men who had worked for him for years, promised to keep watch and spread the word to the others. By the time he returned to the house, the sun was beginning to set. He found Emma awake, propped up in bed with pillows, her hair neatly braided courtesy of Rebecca. The simple white nightgown she wore made her look younger, more vulnerable, but there was a new alertness in her eyes that hadn't been there the day before. "You're back," she said when he entered, relief evident in her voice. "I said I would be," he reminded her gently, taking the chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Your sister has been very kind, and the doctor says I'm healing well." Quentin nodded. "Doc Wilson's the best in the county. If he says you're improving, you can trust it." Emma studied his face. "Did you speak with the sheriff?" "I did. He believes you, Emma. These men have been on the law's radar for some time. Jenkins is contacting the federal marshals who have been investigating." Some of the tension left her shoulders. "So he's not involved?" "No. He's a good man, and he said to tell you that you're braver than you know." Emma looked away, a flush coloring her cheeks. "I don't feel brave, I feel broken." Without thinking, Quentin reached for her hand. "Broken things can be mended, Emma, and courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about facing it anyway." She turned back to him, her eyes searching his face. "You speak as if you know." "The war taught me that much," he admitted. "I was terrified every day, but I kept going because I had to, just like you did when you escaped that cabin." Emma's fingers tightened around his. "Tell me about the war. Were you there the whole time?" Quentin recognized her attempt to change the subject away from her own trauma, and he allowed it. "Nearly. I joined up in '62, fought with the Union Army until Appomattox in '65. "You must have seen terrible things," she said softly. "I did. But I saw remarkable things too. Men sharing their last rations with starving civilians, enemies stopping to help each other's wounded." He shook his head at the memories. "It taught me that even in the darkest times, there's still goodness to be found." "Is that why you helped me? Looking for goodness in the darkness?" Quentin considered her question carefully. "No, I helped you because you needed it, because leaving you there wasn't an option." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her hand still in his. "I've been on my own for a long time," she finally said. "After my parents died, I learned to rely only on myself, to need no one." She looked down at their joined hands. "But now you're not alone," Quentin finished for her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of understanding that went beyond words. For a breathless moment, Quentin thought he might lean forward, might give in to the inexplicable pull he felt toward her. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. Rebecca entered, carrying a tray with dinner. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, looking between them with a knowing expression as they quickly separated their hands. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice slightly uneven. "It smells wonderful." Rebecca set the tray down and touched Quentin's shoulder. "You should eat too. I've left a plate for you in the kitchen." "I'll be there shortly," he promised. When Rebecca had gone, an awkward silence fell between them. Quentin stood, suddenly unsure of himself. "I should let you eat while it's hot." Emma nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across her face. "Thank you for telling me about the sheriff. It helps to know someone believes me." "I believe you, Emma," Quentin said quietly. "I have from the first moment." The smile she gave him then was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming her face despite the healing bruises. "I know, and that means more than I can say." As Quentin left the room, he was struck by the realization that in just 2 days, Emma Pierce had come to matter to him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. He was drawn to her courage, her resilience, the quiet dignity with which she bore her suffering. But more than that, he was drawn to her, to the woman beneath the trauma, the spirit that refused to be broken. It was too soon, he told himself. She needed time to heal, to find her footing again, and he needed to focus on keeping her safe from the men who sought to reclaim her. Whatever this feeling was, it would have to wait. But as he joined Rebecca and Michael for dinner, his thoughts kept returning to the woman in the guest bedroom and the way her hand had felt in his, small but strong, like Emma herself. The next week passed in a rhythm of cautious healing. Emma grew stronger each day, able to sit up for longer periods and even walk short distances with assistance. The bruises on her face began to fade, changing from angry purple to yellowing green. Doc Wilson visited twice more, pleased with her progress but adamant that she continue to rest. Quentin found himself spending more and more time with her. At first, it was just brief visits, checking that she had everything she needed. Then longer conversations as he shared meals with her, telling her about Double Creek and his plans for the ranch. Soon, he was reading to her in the evenings, continuing the stories Michael had started, his deep voice bringing the adventures to life. For her part, Emma gradually opened up about her past. She told him about growing up in Ohio, her father a carpenter and her mother a seamstress. About the fire that had claimed them both when she was 16, and how she had made her way west on her own, determined to become a teacher. "I always loved learning," she explained one evening as they sat together by the window, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. "Books were my escape, my window to worlds beyond my own. I wanted to give that gift to children who might otherwise never have it." "You still can," Quentin said. "Las Animas has a school, but they're always short on teachers." Emma's expression turned wistful. "Perhaps someday, when this is over." Neither of them spoke aloud the question that hung between them. Would it ever truly be over? The men who had hurt her were still free, and while there had been no sign of them at Double Creek, the threat remained like a shadow at the edges of their growing contentment. On the 8th day after her rescue, Emma insisted on joining the family for dinner at the table. Quentin helped her dress in one of Rebecca's old dresses, modified to accommodate her splinted arm. Her hair, now fully clean and brushed to a honey gold shine, was simply braided down her back. "You look beautiful," he said without thinking as she stood before the mirror. Emma blushed, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "Thank you, I feel almost human again." Quentin offered his arm. "Shall we?" Dinner was a lively affair, with Michael dominating the conversation, eager to share his day's adventures with Miss Emma, who he had decided was the most interesting adult besides his uncle to ever visit the ranch. And then the calf just ran right between my legs, he exclaimed, demonstrating with his hands. Uncle Quentin says I'm a natural cowboy. Emma laughed, the sound making Quentin's heart leap. It was the first time he'd heard her truly laugh, and it transformed her face, bringing a sparkle to her green eyes that he found captivating. You certainly sound like one, she agreed. I've never met a boy your age who knew so much about cattle. Michael beamed at the praise. Uncle Quentin's teaching me everything. Someday I'm going to help him run Double Creek. Quentin ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. That you will, partner. Rebecca watched the exchange with a soft smile, her eyes moving between her son, her brother, and Emma with knowing consideration. After dinner, as Rebecca took Michael upstairs for his bath, Quentin and Emma lingered at the table. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the distant sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Thank you, Emma said suddenly. For what? For this. For making me feel normal again, like a person, not just a victim. Quentin reached across the table, taking her hand as had become their habit over the past days. You were never just a victim, Emma, not to me. She studied their joined hands. What happens now, Quentin? I can't stay here forever living off your kindness. Why not? He asked, only half joking. Emma gave him a look that was both fond and exasperated. Because I need to rebuild my life, find work, make my own way. And if I asked you to stay, not out of kindness but because. He hesitated, unsure how to express feelings he was only beginning to understand himself. Emma's eyes widened slightly. Because, Quentin took a deep breath, because in these past days I've come to care for you, Emma, more than I expected, more than might be wise given the circumstances. She looked down, but not before he saw the mix of hope and fear in her eyes. Quentin, I'm not the same woman I was before. I don't know if I can ever be what you deserve. I'm not asking for anything, Emma, he said gently. I'm just telling you how I feel, and that there's a place for you here for as long as you want it. Emma lifted her gaze to his, vulnerability and longing warring in her expression. I care for you too, she whispered, but I'm afraid, not just of those men, but of feeling this way, of trusting again. Quentin understood. In the quiet moments of their conversations, Emma had revealed more about the man in Denver, a banker named William who had courted her, promised marriage, then revealed he was already married with children. His rejection had wounded her deeply, adding to the self-reliance that had defined her life since losing her parents. I would never betray your trust, Quentin promised, but I understand your caution. There's no rush, Emma, no pressure, we have time. The smile she gave him was tentative but real. Time, she repeated. Yes, I'd like that. The moment was interrupted by the sound of hooves approaching the house. Quentin tensed immediately, his hand moving to the gun he still wore even inside the house. Stay here, he told Emma. Rising and moving to the window in the gathering darkness, he could make out a single rider approaching at a steady pace. As the figure came closer, relief washed over him. It was only Jake, one of his ranch hands, returning from town where he'd gone for supplies. It's Jake, he told Emma, whose face had gone pale with fear. Nothing to worry about. But as Jake dismounted and approached the house, Quentin could see tension in the man's posture. Something was wrong. Stay inside, he told Emma, moving to the door. Jake met him on the porch, his face grim in the lantern light. Boss, we got trouble. There's men in town asking questions about a missing woman, 3 of them matching the descriptions you gave us. Quentin felt his blood run cold. What kind of questions? If anyone's seen a blonde woman, injured, maybe traveling with a man, they're saying she's the sister of one of them, that she's not right in the head and ran off. Jake spat over the railing. Load of horseshit if you ask me. These boys got mean eyes. Did they mention Double Creek specifically? Jake shook his head. Not that I heard. They're asking at every ranch and homestead, but Jenkins is watching them close. Says they can't do anything without cause. Quentin nodded, his mind racing. Thanks, Jake. Double the night watch. No one approaches the house without being identified first. Already done, boss. Pedro and I'll take first shift. Jake hesitated. Boss, these men, they look dangerous. They are, Quentin said grimly. But so am I when my family's threatened. After Jake left to take up his position, Quentin returned inside to find Emma standing in the doorway, her face ashen. They're here, she whispered. They've found me. They're in town, Quentin corrected her. Not here, and they don't know for certain where you are. Emma wrapped her good arm around herself, shaking slightly. It doesn't matter. They'll keep looking until they find me, and then they'll kill you all for helping me. Quentin closed the distance between them, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Emma, look at me. When she did, he continued, No one is going to hurt you, not while I'm breathing. Do you understand? She nodded, though fear still clouded her eyes. We knew this might happen, he reminded her. We're prepared. The ranch is secure, and Jenkins knows to watch these men. If they make a move against us, they'll have to deal with more than just me. Emma leaned forward suddenly, resting her forehead against his chest. Quentin's arms came around her automatically, careful of her injuries. He held her as she trembled, his chin resting on top of her head. I'm so tired of being afraid, she whispered against his shirt, of looking over my shoulder, of bringing danger to people I care about. I know, Quentin said softly, but you're not alone in this fight anymore, Emma, and I promise you it will end. She pulled back slightly to look up at him. In the soft lamplight, her face was a study in vulnerability and determination. It will only end when they're stopped, truly stopped. Quentin understood what she was saying. It wasn't enough to drive these men away or scare them off. As long as they were free, as long as their operation continued, Emma would never be truly safe. Then we'll stop them, he said simply. Emma's eyes widened. How? I don't know yet. But between us, Jenkins and the federal marshals will find a way. She studied his face as if searching for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she nodded slowly. All right, then I'll help. Emma, no, listen, she insisted. I know these men. I heard them talking when they thought I was unconscious or too broken to understand. I know their patterns, their connections. I can help the marshals build a case against them. Quentin felt a surge of pride at her courage, even as worry gnawed at him. It would be dangerous. I know, Emma said quietly, but I can't hide forever, Quentin. And I can't let other women suffer what I did. He recognized the resolve in her voice, the same determination that had driven her to crawl away from that cabin despite her injuries. This was the real Emma Pierce, not a victim, but a woman of incredible strength and compassion. All right, he agreed. But we do this carefully, together. The relief in her eyes was palpable. She reached up with her good hand, touching his face with tentative fingers. Thank you for believing in me, for seeing me as I am, not just what was done to me. Quentin turned his face into her touch, his heart pounding at the simple contact. I see you, Emma. I always have. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but an undercurrent of tension ran through Double Creek Ranch. Quentin had informed Rebecca of the men in town, and she had taken the news with characteristic practicality, immediately ensuring that Michael would remain close to the house under the watchful eyes of either her or Pedro's wife, Constanza, who helped with the household chores. Emma appeared at breakfast looking pale but determined. She had slept little, plagued by nightmares of her captivity, but she had refused Quentin's offer to sit with her through the night. What's our plan? She asked without preamble as she took her seat at the table. "I'm riding into town to speak with Jenkins," Quentin said. "If these men are still around, I want to know what they're doing and saying." Emma nodded. "And I'll stay here, I suppose." "It's safest," Quentin confirmed. "Rebecca and the hands will keep watch." Emma accepted this with reluctant agreement. "Will you tell Jenkins I'm ready to speak with the federal marshals, to give a formal statement?" Quentin studied her face. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted, "but it's the right thing to do." After breakfast, Quentin prepared to ride to Las Animas. As he saddled midnight, Emma came to the barn, moving more steadily now, though still favoring her injured side. "Be careful," she said quietly. "These men, they're observant if they suspect you know anything about me." Quentin tightened Midnight's cinch. "I'll be cautious. I've told the men in town that I'm coming in for supplies and to check mail. Nothing unusual." Emma stepped closer, her uninjured hand coming to rest on Midnight's neck. "I keep thinking about what you said last night. About seeing me as I am." Quentin turned to face her, their bodies close in the dim light of the barn. "I meant it." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what terrifies me and thrills me." Before he could respond, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a soft, quick kiss to his cheek. "For luck," she explained, stepping back, a blush coloring her face. Quentin touched the spot where her lips had been, momentarily speechless. Then he smiled, a slow smile that reached his eyes. "I'll be back before you know it." As he rode toward Las Animas, Quentin's thoughts were a tangle of concern for Emma's safety and the lingering warmth of her kiss. It had been innocent enough, yet it felt like a threshold crossed, an acknowledgement of the feelings growing between them. The town appeared quiet when he arrived, with no immediate sign of the three strangers. Quentin tied Midnight outside the general store and went inside, maintaining his cover of kneading supplies. Martha Thompson, the storekeeper's wife, greeted him warmly. "Quentin Nash. Haven't seen you in near 2 weeks. How's that sister and nephew of yours?" "They're well, Mrs. Thompson, thank you," Quentin said, picking up a few items they actually needed: coffee, sugar, ammunition for his rifle. "And how's your house guest, Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice lowered conspiratorially. "Word is you found some poor woman half dead and took her in." Quentin kept his expression neutral. "News travels fast." "Small town," Mrs. Thompson shrugged. "Is she recovering well?" "She is, thank you," Quentin said, unwilling to share more details. "Have you had any other visitors in town recently? I noticed some unfamiliar faces at the saloon as I rode in." Mrs. Thompson's expression darkened. "Those 3. Been here 2 days now, asking all manner of questions. Claim they're looking for a missing relative, but I don't trust them an inch, especially that one with the scar." She leaned closer. "Sheriff's been watching them like a hawk." "Where are they staying?" Quentin asked casually. "Rooms above the saloon. Though they ride out each day, checking the surrounding ranches, they say." Mrs. Thompson began wrapping his purchases. "If you ask me, they're up to no good. Thomas, that's my nephew who works at the stables, says they've been asking specifically about ranches with women present." Quentin felt his stomach tighten. "Is that so?" "Mm. And they were mighty interested when someone mentioned you had a lady staying at Double Creek, said they might pay a social call." Alarm shot through Quentin. "Who told them that?" Mrs. Thompson looked uncomfortable. "I'm not one to name names, but it might have been that new bartender at the saloon. You know, the one who came up from Santa Fe last month." Quentin paid for his purchases quickly. "Thank you for the warning, Mrs. Thompson. I'd best be getting back." "You take care now, Quentin," she said, concern evident in her voice. "And if you need any help out there, you just send word. My Thomas and his friends would be happy to ride out." Quentin nodded his thanks and left, heading straight for the sheriff's office. Jenkins was at his desk, reviewing wanted posters, his expression grim. "Quentin," he greeted him. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "They know about Emma," Quentin said without preamble. "Someone told them she's at Double Creek." Jenkins swore softly. "I was afraid of that. They've been asking questions all over town." "Have you identified them?" The sheriff nodded. "Frank Doyle, Roy Mercer, and Jackson Welch, all wanted in multiple territories for various crimes, though nothing as organized as what your Miss Pierce describes." He passed Quentin 3 wanted posters. "Doyle's the one with the scar. Mean son of a bitch, did time in Yuma for nearly beating a man to death." Quentin studied the crude drawings on the posters, memorizing the faces. "Mrs. Thompson says they've been riding out to local ranches." "They have," Jenkins confirmed. "So far, they've maintained their story about looking for a missing relative. Haven't done anything I can arrest them for, more's the pity." "If they come to Double Creek, I know," Jenkins interrupted, "and I'll ride out there the moment I hear they're headed your way." "But Quentin, you need to be smart about this. These men are killers." Quentin's jaw tightened. "So was I once in the war." Jenkins studied him. "That was different and you know it. This isn't a battlefield with clear lines." "Isn't it?" Quentin challenged. "They've drawn the lines pretty clearly, Tom. They hurt Emma. They'll hurt others if they're not stopped." The sheriff sighed, recognizing the determination in Quentin's eyes. "I got word back from Marshal Hayes. He'll be here within the week. Says your Miss Pierce's testimony could break this case wide open." "She's ready to give it," Quentin said. "She told me this morning." Pride and concern warred in Jenkins' expression. "She's a brave woman." "The bravest I've ever known," Quentin agreed. Jenkins studied him closely. "You care for her?" It wasn't a question, but Quentin answered anyway. "I do, more than I thought possible after knowing someone so briefly." "Then be careful, son," Jenkins advised. "Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. These men are cunning, and they're desperate. A woman who can identify them, who knows their operation. They'll kill to silence her." "They'll have to go through me first," Quentin said firmly. Jenkins nodded, understanding that further warnings would be futile. "I'll send riders to check on you twice daily. If these men make a move, we'll know." Quentin left the sheriff's office with a growing sense of urgency. He needed to get back to Double Creek, to warn Emma and the others that their location was known. As he mounted Midnight, he caught sight of a man watching him from the saloon doorway, tall, with a prominent scar across his chin. Frank Doyle. Their eyes met briefly across the dusty street. Doyle's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, but looked more like a predator baring its teeth. Then he tipped his hat mockingly and disappeared back inside the saloon. The message was clear. "I know who you are. I know what you're hiding." Quentin spurred Midnight into a gallop, pushing the horse harder than usual in his haste to reach home. The 10 miles between Las Animas and Double Creek had never seemed so long. As he crested the final hill, the ranch coming into view below, he searched frantically for any sign of trouble. Everything looked normal: ranch hands moving cattle in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney, Rebecca's laundry still hanging on the line. He raced into the yard, calling out as soon as he dismounted. "Rebecca! Emma!" Rebecca appeared on the porch, her face concerned. "Quentin, what is it?" "Where's Emma?" he demanded, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "In the garden with Michael." "Quentin, you're scaring me." "What's happened?" Before he could answer, Emma emerged from around the side of the house, Michael's hand in hers. Her face went pale when she saw Quentin's expression. "They know," she said, not a question but a certainty. Quentin nodded grimly. "Someone in town told them you're here. I saw one of them watching me." "Frank Doyle." Michael looked between them, confusion on his young face. "Uncle Quentin, are the bad men coming?" Quentin knelt to his nephew's level. "Maybe, partner, but we're not going to let them hurt anyone, all right? I need you to be brave and do exactly what your mother tells you." The boy nodded solemnly. I can be brave. Rebecca pulled her son close. I'll get his things packed, just in case we need to leave quickly. As she ushered Michael inside, Emma moved closer to Quentin, her face set in determined lines despite the fear in her eyes. What did the sheriff say? Quentin quickly filled her in on his conversation with Jenkins, showing her the wanted posters. The marshal is on his way, but it could be days before he arrives. Emma studied the crude drawings, her hand trembling slightly. That's them, Frank, Roy, and Jackson. She pointed to each face in turn. Frank was the cruelest. He's the one who did this. She gestured to her healing injuries. Quentin fought back a surge of rage at the confirmation. We need to prepare. If they come, it won't be for a friendly visit. Emma nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. What do? First, we make sure you're never alone, not even for a moment. Quentin touched her arm gently. Second, we prepare the house and the men for a possible attack. And third, Emma added softly, we pray the marshal arrives before they do. Quentin smiled grimly. I've never been much for praying, but I'm willing to try. The rest of the day was spent in tense preparation. Quentin gathered his ranch hands, explaining the situation and assigning defensive positions around the property. Windows were boarded, extra ammunition distributed, and escape routes planned in case they needed to flee quickly. By nightfall, Double Creek Ranch had been transformed from a peaceful home to a fortress. Rebecca had packed essential supplies for herself and Michael, ready to escape with Emma through a hidden ravine behind the house if the worst happened. The boy, sensing the gravity of the situation despite his young age, remained unusually quiet, staying close to his mother and Emma. As darkness fell, Quentin took the first watch, positioned on the porch with his rifle across his lap. Emma joined him after Michael and Rebecca had gone to bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. You should be resting, Quentin said as she sat beside him. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, not knowing they're out there somewhere planning. They sat in silence for a while, watching the moonlit landscape for any sign of movement. I'm sorry, Emma finally said. Quentin turned to her, surprised. For what? For bringing this danger to your home, to your family. She looked down at her hands, the left still splinted but healing. If anything happens to any of you because of me. Emma, look at me, Quentin said firmly. When she did, he continued, you didn't bring this danger. Those men did. And I chose to help you knowing the risks. Why? She asked, the question that had been between them from the beginning. Why risk so much for a stranger? Quentin considered his answer carefully. When I found you that day, crawling away from that cabin, I saw something in you, a strength that wouldn't be broken, a light that wouldn't be extinguished despite everything you'd endured. He paused, searching for the right words. I think I started falling in love with you right then, though I didn't realize it until later. Emma's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had used that word love. Quentin, you don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I know it's too soon, that you're still healing. I just wanted you to know why I've done what I've done. It was never out of pity or obligation. Emma's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. Slowly, she reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with wonder, as if discovering something precious. I thought I'd never trust a man again, she whispered. Never let myself be vulnerable, never risk my heart. Her hand came to rest against his cheek. But from the moment you found me, you've shown me nothing but kindness, respect, and strength. You've reminded me that there is still good in this world, even after all the evil I've seen. Quentin covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. And you've reminded me that there are things worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Emma leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. Is this madness? To To feel this way amidst such danger, maybe, Quentin conceded. Or maybe it's the only thing that makes sense. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, tentative at first, then deeper as Emma's good arm wound around his neck. Quentin's hand came up to cradle her face, careful of her healing injuries, pouring all the tenderness and protection he felt into the contact. When they parted, Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "If we survive this," she whispered, "if we stop these men and I'm truly free." "Then what?" Quentin prompted, his heart pounding. A smile touched her lips. "Then I'd like to stay, here at Double Creek with you." Quentin felt as if his chest might burst with joy despite the danger that surrounded them. "Nothing would make me happier," he said honestly. The sound of approaching hooves shattered the moment. Quentin was on his feet instantly, rifle raised, pushing Emma behind him. "Get inside," he ordered. "Wake Rebecca and get ready to leave if necessary." Emma hesitated, clearly torn between obeying and staying with him. "Quentin, please, Emma. I can't focus if I'm worried about you being hit by a stray bullet." She nodded reluctantly and slipped inside, leaving Quentin alone on the porch, watching as a single rider approached through the moonlight. "Identify yourself," he called when the figure was within earshot. "It's Jenkins," came the reply. "Don't shoot, Nash." Relief washed over Quentin as he recognized the sheriff's voice. He lowered his rifle but didn't set it aside as Jenkins rode into the yard and dismounted. "What brings you out here at this hour, Tom?" Quentin asked, noting the grave expression on the sheriff's face. "They've left town," Jenkins said without preamble. "All three of them, about an hour ago, paid their bill at the saloon and rode out." Quentin felt his stomach knot. "Headed this way, can't say for certain." "They were asking about the old mining trails before they left the ones that run behind your property." "The ravine," Quentin realized with growing alarm. "The escape route we planned for the women and Michael." Jenkins nodded grimly. "I think they mean to cut off your retreat options before they attack." "How did they know about those trails?" Quentin demanded. "Could be they studied maps. Could be they have help locally." Jenkins shook his head. "Doesn't matter now. What matters is that they're coming and they're not planning to leave witnesses." Quentin's mind raced. "How long do we have? If they're taking the mining trails, they'll have to circle wide. Maybe 3 hours, less if they push their horses hard. And the marshal?" "Still at least a day away," Jenkins admitted. "I've sent riders to try to intercept him, but—" "We're on our own," Quentin finished. Jenkins nodded. "I've deputized some men from town. They're gathering now, should be here within the hour. But Quentin, even with their help, we're outnumbered." "What do you mean? There's only 3 of them." Jenkins' expression grew even more grim. "Not anymore. They met with at least 4 others at the edge of town before they left. These men have reinforcements." Quentin swore softly. 7 against his 5 ranch hands, Jenkins and himself. The odds weren't good, especially with women and a child to protect. "We need to get Emma, Rebecca, and Michael out of here," he decided. "If the mining trails are compromised, we'll have to find another way." "The old trapper's cabin to the north," Jenkins suggested. "It's remote and not on any maps I know of." Quentin nodded. "I'll send them there with Jake. He knows those hills better than anyone." The door opened behind them and Emma stepped out, her face pale but composed. "I heard," she said simply. "They're coming." "Emma," Quentin began. "I'm not running," she interrupted, her voice firm despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Not again. Not while you're in danger because of me." Quentin moved to her, taking her arms gently. "This isn't about bravery, Emma. You're injured, and these men, they'll kill you if they find you." "They'll kill all of you anyway," she said quietly. "You know that. They can't leave witnesses." Jenkins cleared his throat. "She's right, Quentin. These men don't plan to leave anyone alive who can connect them to the trafficking ring." Quentin looked between them, frustration and fear warring within him. "Then what do you suggest? That we all stay and fight? Against 7 armed men who know exactly what they're doing?" "No," Emma said, a new resolve hardening her voice. "I suggest we set a trap." Both men stared at her. "A trap?" Jenkins repeated. Emma nodded. "They want me, so let them think they can get me." Her eyes met Quentin's, steady despite the terror that must have been coursing through her. "Let them come, but on our terms, not theirs." As dawn broke over Double Creek Ranch, an eerie quiet had settled over the property. Rebecca and Michael had been sent north with Jake, taking a little used trail that Quentin prayed would keep them safely away from the coming confrontation. The remaining ranch hands were positioned strategically around the property, hidden from sight but ready to defend it. Inside the main house, Quentin, Emma, and Sheriff Jenkins made final preparations for the trap they had set. It was dangerous, perhaps foolishly so, but it was their best chance to end this threat permanently. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Quentin asked Emma for what must have been the 10th time since they'd finalized their plan. She nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'm tired of running. Tired of being afraid." She touched his arm gently. "And I refuse to let these men hurt anyone else. Ever again." Jenkins checked his pocket watch. "If they're coming, it'll be soon. They'll want daylight for their attack, but not so much that they can be easily spotted from a distance." As if on cue, Pedro appeared at the kitchen door, his expression grim. "Riders approaching from the east, boss. 7 of them, just like the sheriff said." Quentin nodded. "Everyone in position?" "Yes, sir, just waiting on your signal." "Good. Tell the men not to fire until they hear my shot." Not a moment before, as Pedro slipped away, Quentin turned to Emma. "Last chance to change your mind." Emma's answer was to rise on her tiptoes and kiss him firmly on the lips. "For luck," she said, echoing her words from the day before. "Now go, I need to get ready." Quentin held her gaze for a moment longer, memorizing her face as if it might be the last time he saw it. Then he nodded and left, taking up his position in the barn with a clear view of the front of the house. Emma and Jenkins moved to the large front window, peering carefully around the edge of the curtain. In the distance, they could see the riders approaching at a steady pace, spreading out as they neared the ranch. "Frank Doyle's in the lead," Jenkins murmured, recognizing the scarred man from the wanted poster. "The heavy-set one to his right is Roy Mercer. Young one with the light eyes is Jackson Welch." Emma nodded, her breath quickening as she recognized her tormentors. "The others must be hired guns, or part of their wider network." "Steady now," Jenkins said, noting her growing tension. "Remember the plan." Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I remember." They watched as the riders approached the yard, confident in their numerical superiority, making no attempt to conceal their presence. Frank Doyle raised his hand, signaling the others to stop as he rode forward alone. "Hello, the house," he called, his voice carrying across the quiet morning air. "Anyone home?" Jenkins nodded to Emma. "That's your cue. I'll be right behind you." Emma moved to the door, her injured arm prominently displayed in its sling, her face composed despite the fear that must have been coursing through her. She stepped onto the porch, standing tall as she faced the man who had nearly killed her. "Hello, Frank," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Looking for me?" Frank Doyle's scarred face split into a cruel smile. "Well, well, if it isn't our runaway merchandise." His eyes raked over her, noting her healing injuries. "You're looking better than the last time I saw you, crawling in the dirt like an animal." Emma's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm no one's merchandise," Frank laughed, the sound chilling in its casual cruelty. "That's where you're wrong, sweetheart. You belong to us, or rather to the gentleman who's paid a very handsome sum for you." He glanced around, taking in the seemingly deserted ranch. "Where's your cowboy protector? Did he run off and leave you?" "I sent him away," Emma said, following the script they had prepared. "Him and his family. I couldn't bear to see them hurt because of me." "How noble," Frank mocked, "and stupid. Now there's no one to stop us from taking back what's ours." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Sheriff Jenkins said, stepping onto the porch beside Emma, his badge prominent on his chest, his gun drawn. Frank's eyes narrowed. "Sheriff, this doesn't concern you. This woman is a thief and a liar. She stole from us and we're here to collect what's ours." "Funny, that's not how Miss Pierce tells it," Jenkins replied evenly. "She says you abducted her, beat her, and planned to sell her." "And who are you going to believe? A respectable businessman or some schoolteacher whore?" Frank's hand moved subtly toward his holster. "Now, I suggest you step aside and let us take the woman. No one needs to get hurt here." "That's where you're wrong," Jenkins said. "Frank Doyle, you and your associates are under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and suspected human trafficking." Frank laughed again, louder this time. "Are you simple, Sheriff? There's 7 of us and only one of you. How exactly do you plan to arrest anyone?" "He's not alone," Quentin called, stepping out from the barn, his rifle aimed directly at Frank. Around the property, the ranch hands emerged from their hiding places, all armed and ready. At the same time, the men Jenkins had deputized appeared from behind the ridge, effectively surrounding Doyle and his men. Frank's confident smile faltered as he realized they'd ridden into a trap. His eyes darted between Quentin, Jenkins, and Emma, calculating his odds. "You're surrounded, Doyle," Jenkins said firmly. "Tell your men to drop their weapons." For a moment it seemed Frank might comply. Then his face twisted with rage and he drew his gun with lightning speed, aiming not at Jenkins or Quentin but at Emma. "If I can't have her, no one will." He snarled. Quentin's rifle cracked, the sound echoing across the ranch yard. Frank's body jerked as the bullet struck him in the shoulder, causing his shot to go wide, splintering the porch railing inches from Emma. Chaos erupted as both sides opened fire. Emma dropped to the porch floor, Jenkins covering her with his body as bullets whizzed overhead. Quentin kept firing methodically from his position, dropping one of the hired guns from his saddle. The gunfight was intense but brief. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Doyle's men quickly found themselves at a disadvantage. Within minutes, 2 were dead, 3 wounded, and the remaining 2 had thrown down their weapons in surrender. Frank Doyle lay in the dust of the yard, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face contorted with hate as Quentin approached, rifle still trained on him. "You should have killed me," Frank spat, "because I'll never stop coming for her. Never." Quentin's finger tightened on the trigger, the temptation to end this threat permanently nearly overwhelming. Then he felt a hand on his arm and turned to find Emma beside him, her eyes clear and determined. "No," she said softly. "Not like this. He needs to face justice. They all do." She looked down at the wounded man with a mixture of pity and resolve. "He needs to tell the marshals everything he knows about Garrett and the entire operation." Quentin lowered his rifle slightly, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Frank Doyle alive and talking would save more women than Frank Doyle dead. "You heard the lady," he told Frank, his voice hard despite his restraint. "You're going to jail, and then you're going to tell the federal marshals everything you know about your operation." Frank's laugh was pained but defiant. "You think this ends with me? Garrett has men everywhere, judges, politicians. You can't touch him." "We'll see about that," Jenkins said, approaching with manacles. "Right now, my concern is getting you and your surviving men to a cell." As Jenkins and his deputies secured the prisoners, Quentin turned to Emma, his eyes searching her face for signs of distress. "Are you all right?" she nodded, her gaze fixed on the men who had caused her so much pain. "I will be. Now." Quentin wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "It's over, Emma. They can't hurt you anymore." She leaned into his strength, allowing herself to tremble now that the immediate danger had passed. "Not these men, no, but Frank's right about one thing: Garrett is still out there. And the marshals will find him," Quentin assured her. "Your testimony, combined with whatever they get from Doyle and the others, will bring down the entire operation." Emma looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of relief and lingering fear. "And then, when it's truly over." Quentin brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "Then we begin. Together." The promise in those simple words seemed to lift a weight from Emma's shoulders. She stood straighter, her gaze clearer as she looked around at the ranch that had become her sanctuary. "Together," she repeated, the word both an agreement and a vow. 3 months later, Emma stood on the porch of Double Creek Ranch, watching as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Her arm had healed completely, though she still felt occasional twinges when the weather changed. The physical scars of her ordeal were fading, and the emotional ones, while still present, had lost much of their power over her. The door opened behind her and Quentin stepped out, a cup of coffee in each hand. He offered one to her with a smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. Emma sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened. It feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday all at once." Quentin nodded, understanding. The past months had been a whirlwind of testimony, court appearances, and gradual healing. Frank Doyle and his surviving men had faced justice, receiving long sentences for their crimes. More importantly, their testimony had led the federal marshals to several more trafficking operations across the territory, and eventually to Garrett himself, a respected Denver businessman whose respectability had masked unspeakable crimes. "Marshal Hayes says they've rescued 15 women in the past month alone," Quentin told her, referring to the federal lawman who had become a frequent correspondent. "All thanks to you, Emma." She shook her head modestly. "I only did what I had to do." "You did more than that," Quentin insisted. "You were brave when most would have broken. You faced your tormentors when you could have run. You've saved lives, Emma. Women who will never know your name but who owe their freedom to you." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. In the months since the confrontation at Double Creek, she had struggled with nightmares and moments of paralyzing fear. But she had also found strength she never knew she possessed, purpose in helping other survivors, and love in the arms of the man beside her. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You saved me in more ways than one, Quentin." He set his coffee down and turned to face her, taking her free hand in his. "We saved each other," he corrected. "You brought light back to Double Creek, Emma, to Michael, to Rebecca." He paused, his eyes warm with emotion. "To me." Emma set her own cup aside, stepping closer to him. In the months they had been together, their love had grown from the urgent, desperate connection forged in danger to something deeper, more solid. They had learned each other's stories, shared their hopes and fears, built a foundation for something lasting. "I never expected to find this," she admitted. "After everything that happened in Denver after William's betrayal, I thought I would be alone, that it was safer that way." Quentin's arms circled her waist, drawing her against him. "And now," Emma smiled up at him, her heart full, "now I can't imagine being anywhere but here, with you." Quentin reached into his pocket, his expression suddenly nervous in a way she rarely saw. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. Waiting until you were truly healed, until the trials were over, until you could make this choice without the shadow of the past hanging over you. Emma's breath caught as he withdrew a small box. Quentin. He opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. It was my mother's, he explained. Emma Pierce, I found you crawling away from that cabin, fighting for your life with a courage that humbled me. I've watched you heal, seen your strength and your heart, and I've fallen more in love with you each day. He took a deep breath. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears filled Emma's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Quentin, I would be proud to be your wife. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands gentle as they had been from the first moment he'd found her. Then he kissed her, pouring all the love and promise of their future together into the contact. When they parted, Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. From darkness to light, she murmured. What's that? Quentin asked, his chin resting on top of her head. That's our story, Emma explained, looking up at him with eyes full of love. I was in darkness and you found me. You brought me into the light. Quentin smiled, his heart full to bursting. And you brought light back to me, Emma, to all of us. As the last rays of sunset faded into twilight, they stood together on the porch of what would now be their home, the future stretching before them like the vast Colorado plains wide open, full of promise, and theirs to build together. 2 years later, Emma Nash stood in the schoolyard of Las Animas, watching as her students filed out at the end of the day. The school bell had just rung, signaling the end of lessons, and the children were eager to begin their weekend. Don't forget your essays on the Constitution are due Monday. She called after them, smiling as several groaned good-naturedly. At 28, Emma had found her purpose again. After marrying Quentin, she had taken the position as the town's schoolteacher, fulfilling her lifelong calling. The townspeople had welcomed her warmly, impressed by her education and even more by her part in breaking up the trafficking ring that had plagued the region. Mrs. Nash. A small voice called her attention to 6-year-old Lily Thompson, Martha's granddaughter. My mama says to ask if you and Mr. Nash are coming to the Founders' Day dance next weekend. Emma smiled warmly. We wouldn't miss it, Lily. Now run along home before your grandmother worries. As the last of the children dispersed, Emma gathered her books and shawl, preparing for the ride home to Double Creek. Quentin usually met her on Fridays, and today was no exception. She spotted him waiting patiently on midnight near the general store, a sight that still made her heart swell with love after 2 years of marriage. As she approached, Quentin dismounted, greeting her with a kiss that was entirely too improper for the middle of town. Hello, Mrs. Nash, he murmured against her lips. Mr. Nash, she returned, a blush still coloring her cheeks despite their familiarity. You'll scandalize the entire town. Let them talk, he said with a grin, helping her mount her own horse, a gentle mare named Starlight that had been his wedding gift to her. As they rode toward home, Emma felt the familiar contentment that had become her daily companion. The nightmares had largely faded, though occasionally she still woke with a start, reaching for Quentin in the darkness. Each time he held her until the fear passed, his steady presence a reminder that she was safe, loved, home. How was your day? She asked as they rode side by side. Productive, Quentin answered. The new breeding stock arrived from Denver, and Michael's becoming quite the horseman. He broke that wild Mustang we caught last month. Emma smiled at the mention of her nephew, now 10 and entirely devoted to ranch life. Rebecca must be proud and terrified. Both, Quentin chuckled. Speaking of Rebecca, she wanted me to remind you about Sunday dinner. She's making your favorite apple pie. As if I could forget, Emma said warmly. Though Rebecca had moved to her own small house on the Double Creek property after Emma and Quentin married, the family still gathered regularly for meals and celebrations. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the late afternoon sun warm on their backs. Emma found herself stealing glances at her husband, admiring the strong profile that had become so dear to her. At 37, Quentin was in his prime, his body hardened by ranch work, his face weathered but handsome beneath his hat. "You're staring, Mrs. Nash," he said without looking at her, a smile in his voice. "Am I not allowed to admire my husband?" she teased. Quentin turned to her then, his eyes warm with love. "You may admire all you like, though I'd prefer if you did it somewhere more private than the open road." Emma laughed, the sound free and unrestrained in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "Patience, Mr. Nash. We're almost home." Home. The word held such meaning now. Double Creek had flourished in the past 2 years, expanding its operations and its reputation for fine cattle. But more importantly, it had remained a haven for Emma, for Rebecca and Michael, and for several women who had been rescued from trafficking operations thanks to Emma's testimony. 3 of those women had stayed in the area, finding work and building new lives with Emma's help. 1. Sarah, the girl Emma had mentioned from her captivity, now worked as Rebecca's assistant, managing the household accounts for Double Creek with remarkable skill. As they approached the ranch, Emma could see Michael racing toward them on his pony, eager to share the day's adventures with his uncle. Behind him, the ranch spread out in peaceful prosperity, the cattle grazing in the distance, the buildings solid and well-maintained, the garden she had planted in full bloom. "I have something to tell you," Emma said suddenly, reining in starlight. Quentin stopped beside her, his expression curious. "What is it?" Emma took a deep breath, a smile spreading across her face. "I visited Doc Wilson this morning before school." Understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes, followed by hope so intense it nearly took her breath away. "Emma, are you?" She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. "We're going to have a baby in the spring." Quentin was off his horse in an instant, lifting her down from starlight and spinning her around, his face alight with happiness. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." Emma laughed as he set her back on her feet, her hands coming to rest on his cheeks. "Are you pleased then? Pleased?" Quentin's voice broke with emotion. "Emma, there aren't words." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A child, our child." Emma covered his hand with her own, tears of happiness shimmering in her eyes. "A new beginning. Another light in our lives." Quentin kissed her again, pouring all his love and joy into the gesture. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, his expression solemn despite his happiness. "I promise you, Emma, this child will know nothing but love and safety. I swear it." Emma knew he was thinking of her past, of the darkness she had escaped, but that was behind them now, a distant shadow that had no place in their bright future. "I know," she said softly. "Our child will have everything we can give, most of all, love." Michael reached them then, his young face curious about why his aunt and uncle were standing in the middle of the road embracing instead of coming home. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly as it had begun to do in recent months. Quentin looked at Emma, who nodded her permission to share their news. "Everything is wonderful, Michael," Quentin said, his arm around Emma's waist. "We're going to have a baby. You're going to be a cousin." Michael's face split into a wide grin. "Really? When? Will it be a boy or a girl? Can I help teach it to ride?" Emma laughed at the barrage of questions. "In the spring. We don't know yet. And yes, when the baby is old enough, you can help teach riding lessons." Michael whooped with excitement and raced back toward the house, clearly intending to spread the news to everyone at Double Creek. "So much for telling Rebecca ourselves," Quentin said with a chuckle. "She'll forgive us," Emma replied, leaning into his side as they began walking toward home, leading their horses. Besides, Michael's excitement is a gift in itself. As they approached the ranch yard, Emma felt a familiar sense of gratitude wash over her. From the moment Quentin had found her bleeding and crawling from that cabin, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The path hadn't been easy. There had been pain, fear, and the long process of healing. But there had also been love, strength, and a community that had embraced her as one of their own. That night, after the celebrations had died down and congratulations had been shared, Emma stood once more on the porch of their home, gazing at the stars scattered across the Colorado sky. Quentin joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her from behind, his hands resting protectively over the place where their child grew. Emma leaned back against him, secure in his embrace. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he said, his voice warm against her ear. "When I rode out that day and found you, I was looking for a missing traveler. Instead, I found the missing piece of my own heart." Emma turned in his arms, her eyes finding his in the soft light spilling from the windows. "And I found a man who showed me that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes." As they stood together under the vast starry sky, Emma Pierce Nash knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The cabin that had been her prison was now just a distant memory. The trail of blood she had left behind had been washed away by time and tears and healing. And the cowboy who had found her, who had seen not just a victim but a woman of courage and strength, had become her husband, her partner, her home. "I love you, Quentin Nash," she whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." "And I love you, Emma," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss as the stars wheeled overhead, and their child grew safe beneath her heart, the newest light in a life that had journeyed from deepest darkness to brightest day.